Recently, MTV has blessed us with their freshest piece of their brilliant social commentary regarding color blindness, aka not caring about what race people are, and how it actually does not help prevent racism. So, what can Francesca Ramsey, the host of the music television news, tell us about race and color blindness not preventing racism?
Have you ever wondered why people say, oh, I don't see color as a way to fix racism?
No, because people don't say it.
Yeah, that doesn't work. On this show, we talk about race all the time, but I've got a bomb to drop. Biologically speaking, race doesn't exist. Oh my goodness, we've all been lied to! Wait, why am I hosting this show?
It's simple, Francesca. You're just not intelligent enough to distinguish people as individuals and instead have to group them up by race. Just look at your video history and you can see that you pretty much always judge people in the simplest way possible by their skin color.
So race isn't biological, but the social construct of race and racism still have a very real impact on everyone's lives. And this isn't just about feelings. Race is all about the structural foundation of social power.
Wrong. Race is just a skin color. There can be different privileges built on skin color, but race itself is a skin color. And that's it. That's all it describes.
So why do so many people incorrectly think race is biological? Well, beyond the fact that we like to group people based on external characteristics, it goes like this.
Now she goes on a long description why race is not biological, and I pretty much agree with her on that, so I'll just skip to the part where she actually says something stupid again.
So if race doesn't exist biologically, why do we keep talking about it? Sound the alarm! We keep talking about race because we created it. Yay, us! That's right, race is a social construct. A social construct is a category, perception, or idea created and developed by society and then applied to individuals or groups.
Race is just a distinction of people of different colors. There is nothing more or nothing less to it.
But social constructs are still very real and have huge impacts on our lives. Because you know what else is a social construct? Money. And if you don't think money has an enormous impact on your life, well then congratulations. You either have a trust fund or you're an adorable baby. Or maybe you're a dog.
See, Francesca, this pretty much answers why you're doing race. You are not good in entertainment, not good in humor, so the one thing you can do is point out people's race. Brilliant. This is a brilliant reason why MTV has employed you.
Here's what I know. Talking about racism just creates more racism.
What? Who is saying that? Who is saying that talking about racism creates more racism? You're creating a straw man here. Nobody says that. Are you now trying to argue that ignoring racism helps racism? Because yes, that is true. But how does this tie into the argument that color blindness helps racism? I know she hasn't said it yet, but she will say eventually that color blindness actually helps racism as well. But so far, she is conflating not distinguishing people by race with ignoring racism or racist issues altogether, which is simply dishonest.
No. First off, race isn't the problem. Racism is. And even if it was the problem, problems don't get worse when you talk about them, and they don't magically go away when you ignore them.
No shit.
Colorblindness, while nice in theory, has no effect on structural and institutional racism. Racism is a system, and
No, racism is simply prejudice based on skin color. It is not a system.
that system benefits certain people at the expense of others. Ignoring it just lets those problems persist.
You've heard it here, folks. Not judging people by race means ignoring racism.
Don't believe me? Let's take a look at some examples where colorblindness doesn't work. Number 1, preschool punishment. Let's face a fact, preschool-aged children of every race are monsters. But according to the US Department of Education Office for Civil Rights report released in 2014, black children make up 18% of preschoolers, but almost half of all suspensions. Half. And I don't think anybody believes all these preschool teachers are racist out to get little black children, but the data shows that black and Latino children often face steeper punishments than their white classmates for the same behavior.
Have you read your own study? The study basically tackles the issue of high suspension rates for preschoolers, which is probably an issue because recently people really have become oversensitive to normal childish behavior. But the study you have provided only states that African American preschoolers are suspended more than their counterparts, but it doesn't say it is for the exact same behavior. Don't get me wrong, suspending preschoolers for normal childish behavior is absolutely ridiculous, but you cannot just label it racist if the black preschoolers happen to engage in this behavior more often than the other preschoolers. We can even trace the direct cause if we look at the rate of single parent households in America. You can see that more often than not, black children come from households with a single parent, which causes quite a bit of problems for them and also probably causes their more disruptive behavior. On the other hand, the study you provided also said that Asians are less likely to be disruptive, which is again parallel to the fact that Asians have a smaller number of single parent households.
That's a problem. And simply believing we shouldn't see race or we shouldn't talk about race does nothing to solve this problem.
But there was no racism in this problem. The problem is the overwhelming number of single parent households in the black community. But that is not an issue to do with racism.
Number 2, the name study. A study by the National Bureau of Economic Research confirmed that people with ethnic sounding names, that's a whole nother episode,
Oh goody, more decoded episodes, more misinformation,
are less likely to get interviewed when they apply for jobs. Meanwhile, applicants with white-sounding names actually get 33% more callbacks for interviews. It's the equivalent of having 8 years of additional experience. Shout out to all the white Taquans struggling to get job interviews. And it's not just black and white. They've done similar studies around the world, and in Canada, people with white-sounding names were 35% more likely to get callbacks than people with Indian or Chinese-sounding names.
How do you know racism was involved? To identify racism, you would have to know the races of the business owners. If it was only white business owners calling up white candidates, then I would also have a suspicion that they're racist. But since you don't know the races of the people you sent the offers to, then we cannot really identify the problem. It might have as well been a coincidence. After all the applications were identical. And maybe it is just that no matter the race, you might not find certain names that happen to be from certain racial communities not be as pleasant as the other ones. I wouldn't in no way advocate such discrimination, but it is just a part of life. Sometimes these little things like your name have a huge impact on your future. But if racism was involved, then that was a failure at color blindness, not color blindness failure to stop racism.
So instead of just assuming people shouldn't care about color or names, companies, governments, and schools should take the bias out of hiring and experiment with nameless resumes to, solve the problem.
Sure, why not? That actually isn't that much of a bad idea. I am open to solving a problem if it's there. And I am colorblind to race, so here you have evidence that colorblindness does not equate to not caring about racism.
Number 3, renting an apartment. When the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Urban Institute did a study about real estate, they found that black, Latino, and Asian renters were shown up to 12% fewer units than white renters.
Once again, are you sure that was not a coincidence? 12% is not a significant number that really raises any red flags.
And when the Fair Housing Justice Center used actors to apply for apartments, they found that black and Latino renters were often told there were no apartments available, while white applicants were shown apartments in the same building.
Again, I'm open to fixing a problem if it's there, and I'm colorblind. What does this have to do with my colorblindness being a detriment to fixing this problem?
So this building has a pool, a laundry room, and a racist landlady.
Was that another poor attempt at a joke? You really don't have another career choice than to bitch about racism, don't you?
Color blindness won't fix housing discrimination. We're going to need smart laws and a concerted effort for that.
If housing discrimination based on race is the problem, then how does color blindness not fix that problem? If the landlord has decided to sabotage his business by not showing potential customers all available apartments due to a bias found on race, how is that color blindness? It is a failure at color blindness. You have literally judged a person by their color and decided not to show them all the apartments.
So tell me again how colorblindness is going to fix the fact that I can't get an education, a job, or a house. In many cases, colorblindness is actively harmful
Bitch, what?
because it creates a false sense of security for the groups it directly benefits. The people who've benefited from systemic racism can assume that they got the job or a house or weren't suspended from preschool simply because they were more qualified or just better.
So you basically went and assumed that only the people of the privileged race are the ones who are colorblind. Also, this narrative helps you to label the non-racist white people problematic as well, because they are, of course, part of the problem. Since colorblindness means that they are complacent with actual acts of racism. And yes, many white people are more successful because they are smarter and they are better. Also, many black people are more successful than many white people because they are smarter or well educated. I call this meritocracy, and you call it racism when it's white people being successful. And when it's black people being successful, nah, we are living in a racist system where a black host of a show gets the platform to speak to thousands of people and preach to them about how oppressive this system that is actively silencing her is. There aren't any successful black people, that own a lot of wealth or are any politicians, God forbid presidents. Really, nothing has changed from the 1800s where blacks are only picking up cotton for their white owners.
Ignoring race, or only acknowledging that it doesn't exist biologically, is not a solution to these systemic issues.
Now listen and listen carefully, okay? Listen. I'm gonna say this one last time. Colorblindness is not ignoring racism!
These differences may seem minute, but they're part of a very large structure of oppression that's been ingrained in us.
You mean the original sin, where everyone is born with it, and they have to acknowledge it and repent in order to be forgiven, right? Oh, you're talking about racism, huh? And they say social justice is not a religion.
Drop it.